We're live.
Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education via teleconference of the Moore Park Unified School District, Tuesday, September 15th, 2020 at 5:37 p.m. in the District Office Boardroom. Aurelia, will you call the roll?
Yes. Scott DeTore,
Here.
Jeff Donabedian,
Here.
Robert Perez,
Here.
Nathan Sweet,
Here.
and Ute Van Dam.
Present.
Okay, we had no public comments on closed session items. During closed session, we had conference with labor negotiator, government code section 54957.6, public employee evaluation goal setting, district superintendent, and public employee discipline dismissal and release, government code section 54957. We're now reconvening to open session and recognize the presence of a board quorum and indicate that there was no reportable action taken in closed session. This meeting will be held via teleconference in accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N25-20 and the Ventura County Public Health Stay-at-Home Order. Members of the public have the right to observe the meeting using the link provided on the notice of teleconference meeting that was posted on September 11th, 2020. And speaking of which, if I could get a moment of silence in remembrance of September 11, 2001. Thank you very much. Okay, and then if we'll all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance,
I pledge
to
allegiance
the flag
of the United States of America,
to the republic
and to the
for which
republic
it stands,
for which it
one
stands,
nation, under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Item number 6 is going to be reordering and approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I'd
do
like
we
to
have
make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the agenda as submitted. Approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
A motion from Scott DeTore, seconded by Ute Van Dam. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the minutes. It's recommended that the board approve the minutes of the August 11, 2020 regular meeting. A motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
A motion from Robert Perez, seconded by Jeff Donabedian. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, ayes have it 5-0. On to item number 8, public comment. In accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N25-20 regarding the COVID-19 virus and the notice of the meeting teleconference posted on September 11th, 2020, members of the public may submit their comments electronically to the board secretary at ahernandez@mrpk.org prior to 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting, September 15th, 2020. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Board shall limit the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. With board consent, the board president may increase or decrease the time allowed. Due to the electronic nature of this meeting and to maintain the integrity of providing an opportunity for public comment, every effort will be made to read your comment into the record. Really, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we received 5 of them today. Ready? Okay.
Yes.
The first one is from Scott Pond. And he says, I wish to voice my concerns with regards to the MUSD 2020-21 budget passed by this school board on June 30th, 2020, specifically Resolution 2019-2020-28. While I completely understand the need for cost reductions in the current environment, I do not believe that staff cuts were made in an equitable or transparent fashion. I note one salient item from the minutes of the board's June 30th meeting. Board Member Perez asked if other area districts were taking this action, layoffs of classified personnel. Dr. Hayes responded that Las Virgenes took similar action and noticed more staff members than what Moore Park is recommending. Specifically as to Dr. Hayes' response to Mr. Perez, it appears that LVUSD did cut more staff. However, given that LVUSD is almost twice the size and that their salary budget alone exceeds MUSD's total budget by over 29%, this is at best not an inequitable comparison. The LVUSD 2020-21 budget indicates an anticipated decline in enrollment of 2.81%. Overall, the LVUSD salary budget declined commensurate with the enrollment reduction, with one notable exception. Certificated supervisors and administrators' salaries, Object Code 1300, compensation was reduced by 12.3%. On page 22 of the MUSD adopted budget for 2020-21, there is a table presented showing the budget variances for certificated and classified salaried employees, indicating a reduction of $245,264 and $561,169, respectively, which are deep cuts. Unfortunately, the summary does not present the complete picture. Buried in the SACS financial reporting portion, SACS, of the budget are two disturbing line items on page 11. Certificated supervisors and administrator salaries, Object Code 2300, showed increases. Hang on. Were proposed to increase. Okay, let me back up. I'm sorry. Buried in the SACS financial reporting portion of the budget are two disturbing line items on page 11. Certificated supervisors and administrator salaries, Object Code 1300, were proposed to increase 5%, and classified supervisors and administrator salaries, Object Code 2300, showed increases of 2%. The unaudited actuals versus estimates for 2019-2020 that are presented this evening will show that the certificated supervisors and administrators increase is now 3.57% due to the increase in the actual salary spend versus the estimated values in the June 30th budget. Reviewing the prior two MUSD budgets shows that certificated supervisors and administrator salaries provided increases of 2.2% for 2018-19 and 4.1% for 2019-2020. With the 2020-21 budget, these administrative staff will receive an additional 3.57% increase, while severe and detrimental cuts have been made elsewhere. What is of more interest and concern is that it appears the administrative staff that were tasked with producing a budget for the district are the same ones receiving increases in funding. It is clear that at least some direct student-facing personnel could have been creatively and productively retained by simply foregoing compensation increases to administrative personnel. Instead, the district administrators and board chose to increase compensation to those most removed from the day-to-day student interaction, contrary to the intention of the state legislator and governor. I ask that the board revise the 2020-21 MUSD budget by eliminating all approved supervisor and administrative increases and instead decrease those budget items commensurate with the MUSD projected decline in enrollment. Scott Pond. Okay, the next one is from Glynis Page to the members of the board. I am a 5th grade teacher in Moore Park. First of all, I want to state that I have loved meeting and getting to know my kids this last month, that I miss seeing them and helping them and teaching them in person. I want this pandemic to be over as much as anyone else, but I am concerned that we are jumping into a waiver process before it is safe to return. I am not an epidemiologist, nor do I claim to know everything about returning to school safely. What I do know is that comparable districts in our area are not applying for the waiver. I know that there are guidelines for restaurants, stores, gyms, and other businesses that require people to limit their time while in the establishment. I also know that many of these conduct business outdoors or limit groups of customers to members of the same household. My question is this: when we think of teachers in a classroom being exposed to 30+ students per day at 150 minutes per group in classrooms without windows, ventilation, how is this consistent with the other standards that are being upheld in our communities? I want to make sure that every angle is considered when applying to receive a waiver that allows us to operate before the benchmark standards of safety are officially met. I appreciate the difficult task you have at hand, and I don't envy your position, but I want to make sure that different voices and perspectives are being heard and valued before making a decision that impacts so many. Thank you, Glynis Page. This next one is from Melanie Brower. Dear MUSD board members, I am a 4th grade teacher at MUSD. I am writing to urge you not to apply for a waiver for our TK5 classes to reopen. I write to you not only in regard to my and my family's health, but also the health of my students, their families, my colleagues who I love like family, and our community. This last month of working with my students, even from a distance, has been so wonderful and rewarding. I truly want to be back in the classroom with them more than I can express in this letter. but I absolutely do not want to risk their health or my own to do so. Everyone's health is far more important than going back to school before we are out of the purple tier, in my opinion. I genuinely believe that we should be listening to the science and data here in which the tiers are based on. Many businesses in our county are closed, opened only outdoors, and or some at only 25% capacity. If being indoors in many places throughout our county is deemed unsafe, I would argue that the same would apply to our schools. There are far too many news stories about the unfortunate outcomes for schools who have returned back on campus before it was safe to do so. I truly worry about the health and safety of all individuals if we were to go back to our school sites before being removed from the purple tier. Thank you for your time and consideration. This is from Kathleen Canfield and Annalise Mesa. Dear Board of Education, we are special day class teachers that work with vulnerable population at Floria Academy. Both of us are very dedicated teachers and love our students and school community. We write to you not only in regards to concerns over our and our families' health, but also in regard to the health of our students and their families. Our student population consists of students who have underlying health conditions. Prior to school closures, we and our staff support have needed to assist students with washing hands, wiping their noses, and helping with toileting. We're happy to do this during the normal course of our day during non-pandemic times. Both of our classrooms have poor air circulation and do not have a cross breeze. The science and studies on airflow in indoor locations have shown that poor air circulation contributes to the spread of the virus. Many businesses are only operating outdoors due to safety regulations. Most of the time will be spent indoors and students will not be allowed to access common areas other than the restroom. Prior to school closures, we were able to take students outside for fresh air and play breaks rather than being confined to their desks. We would both like to reiterate that we enjoy teaching this population and want our students to return to our schools when it is safe to do so. Our county continues to be in the purple tier and our county's percentage rate of COVID has gone up since last week. We urge you to reconsider sending our students back to campus before it is deemed safe. We trust that you will make the best decisions for our students, families, teachers, support staff, and community. We appreciate your time and consideration. Warm regards. And the last one is from Alex Serna. Hello, my name is Alex Serna. I am a 4th grade teacher at Floria Academy. This email is my written comment for the board meeting this evening. I would like to voice my concerns regarding a return to in-person school in the coming months as COVID-19 continues to be present in our county and community. I want to express my gratitude for all members of MUSD for working so tirelessly on a comprehensive plan for a potential return to school. I do feel that MUSD has staff and students' best interests in mind. Although distance learning has its challenges, virtual learning with my students has been a positive experience so far. I ask that the school board consider the probability of a student, staff, or teacher contracting COVID-19. You are all most likely aware of the many instances of schools reopening during the fall and the accounts of people contracting the virus despite their proactive efforts and measures to reduce exposure to staff and students alike. Like many of you on the school board, I have a family I care deeply for. I have colleagues with whom I cherish working and students that I love teaching. The fact that there is still a chance any one of us can become seriously ill, and considering we have a choice at the present moment to remain virtual, as a teacher and as a father, I strongly believe that it is in the best interest of everyone that we remain virtual at this time. I wish I could be with my students and I wish they could feel connected to one another in a learning environment as they once were prior to the pandemic, but safety and health should be the #1 priority. I implore you to consider the lives of each member of our community before you make a decision to return to in-person school. I appreciate your time. Alex Serna. That's it.
Thank you very much. Report from Superintendent. On August 19, 2020, the Ventura County Public Health announced that the state has modified its COVID-19 regulations with regard to schools to allow local education agencies to apply for waivers for students in grades TK through 6 to resume in-person instruction. The Board of Education took action on September 8, 2020 for staff to initiate the process to submit a waiver for students in grades TK through 5 to return to school under the blended learning model. The waiver component, among other things, requires feedback from all affected stakeholders. The district surveyed TK through 5 parents and staff members from elementary schools. Staff will present survey results and other pertinent information related to the waiver application process. Any action taken will be at the discretion of the board. Dr. Hayes.
Okay, thank you. We have a presentation, Thomas. Okay, so last week, the school board asked for more information regarding three main areas as they relate to waivers. The first one was testing, availability, and cost, and so locations where we would send our families or our staff members to be tested. Also, more information about triggers that would generate classroom or school closures. And then lastly, stakeholder information. They asked me to engage the stakeholders. Next slide. So with regard to testing, in the County of Ventura, there are expanded free testing sites throughout the county for residents who may have been exposed to someone who has COVID. They can be symptomatic or asymptomatic to be tested. There is no cost associated with, I'm going to share some clinics in a moment, but there's no cost with them. And also if there is a need, if you are displaying symptoms, they will issue the rapid results. So next slide. So throughout Ventura County, these they have drive-up testing sites, walk-up testing sites, and then they have several urgent care locations for testing. And you can see here that we do have a drive-up testing site here in Moorpark at Moorpark College. There are also urgent care locations in Thousand Oaks and Simi Valley that are near to us, as well as Fillmore. So these sites, if any of our parents or families wanted, the option for no test or no cost testing, we would refer them to these areas. And then in addition, next slide. The state of California has passed a healthcare regulation stating that essential workers, which includes all staff in the educational sector, has access to test, and that all California healthcare plans must cover the cost of testing. So our staff our staff that does have healthcare would be able to go to their healthcare provider or to those sites I previously listed to be tested, and there would be no cost to them. So we do have so that there is a manageability with regarding cost of testing, because we do have, as I said, particularly at Moorpark College, we do have a drive-up site that is free of cost here in Moorpark for our families. Next slide. So with regard to triggers, in other words, what would generate closing a class and returning to distance learning, or an entire school? So I wanted to provide some facts here. As a reminder, at the elementary level, each classroom, so each cohort of students, is considered a close contact, meaning if a person would test positive in a class at the elementary level, the entire class or cohort must be quarantined for 14 days, even those who do not have symptoms. Now, there are some exceptions for 10 days, but without a test, if you do not get a test, a COVID test, you do not have to have a COVID test, you would be quarantined for 14 days. So to simplify it, if we would reopen and someone in an elementary classroom is tested positive, we would have to, that class or cohort would return to distance learning until they would receive approval to come back, and it would be anywhere from 10 to 14 days. Next slide, we'll explain the 10 days. So if an individual does test positive, they can return to school when at least 10 days have passed since symptoms first appeared, and they have had 24 hours of no fever, and of course that's without using any fever reducing medication, and other symptoms have improved. We also have individuals who may have been asymptomatic but tested positive. They can also return to school after 10 days after the date of their first positive COVID test. And then there's two other factors that would generate a school closure. One would be if there are 3 positive cases at a school and they would not all be in one class, for example, a school may be closed for 14 days. What would happen is, as the district liaison, I would notify VCPH. We would identify those 3 cases and we would examine the close contacts, and they would determine whether or not the school would have to be closed for 14 days. So it really is a case by case or a 3 case by case situation. The other, and finally, the last situation where a school would be closed would be if 5% of staff or students tested positive, then school would close, we would return to distance learning, and we would not be able to open until we had the approval from VCPH for that particular school. So next slide. So the other area that we looked into was consulting with our parents and our teachers and classified staff, and governing board is also required, but we've been consulting with the governing board the last 2 board meetings about this topic. And so we sent a survey to parents of elementary students and elementary classified and certificated staff. Next slide. So parent waiver survey information. Next slide. Okay, so our surveys went out in English and Spanish. And so we asked the question, are you in favor of the district applying for a waiver to return to in-person school? And you can see here the results. 68% of our parents said yes, while 32% said no. And we further break down that data. Next slide. So you can see our parents, this is by grade level. Now, we do not claim that these are scientifically valid surveys. We were looking for to consult and test the temperature, if you will, of our parents, so that, for example, we did not have identifying factors. So it is possible that a parent could have issued more than one survey, and particularly if they had students in more than one grade level, they may have done that. But we did monitor the numbers and to make sure that we did not have an outlandish amount of surveys submitted that would be far more than our actual parents. And actually, it's very closely aligned. And we did encourage our blended learning only parents to take the survey because regardless, a waiver or not a waiver, our distance learning students would remain at distance learning. So the waiver would only affect blended learning students. But you can see here the percentages of yes and no based on grade level for our parents. And then another question, we asked a second question, next slide. We asked, if a waiver is submitted and approved by Ventura County Public Health, do you feel comfortable sending your child to school for in-person learning? The results are similar. About 67% of our parents said yes, they feel comfortable. About 33% said they're not as comfortable or not comfortable. So again, if you go to the next slide. It breaks it down here by grade level, and it's pretty, questions 1 and 2 reflect one another. So as a parent, if I was not in favor of the district applying for a waiver, I also was extremely likely to say that I'm also not comfortable if a waiver is submitted and approved. So there was no surprises there. The next slide. So then we also surveyed our teachers, and then we also surveyed our classified. And so we have our teacher survey information, and then we actually combined that with our classified information. And we only surveyed affected teachers and staff, those teachers at TK through 5 schools. And so the first question, are you in favor of MUSD applying for a waiver? About 70% of our teachers were not in favor. About 30% were or are in favor. So about 1/3. A little less than 1/3. Then you can see here if you break it down by grade level, TK through 5, and then we have our specialists, and our specialists would be our resource teachers, speech and language teachers, occupational therapists, and we have in this category 137 teachers, so 131 out of 137 answered the survey. So we had most of our teachers did answer the survey, and you can see here the breakdown by grade levels. Next slide. And then similar to the parents, this number 2, if a waiver is submitted and approved by Ventura County Public Health, do you feel comfortable returning to work in an in-person learning environment? About 70% of our staff said no, and almost 30% said yes. Again, questions 1 and 2 generally are consistent with the results. And you can see here breaking down by grade level again for that. And then the last two slides for our survey. This is a combination of our classified and certificated staff at elementary schools. And you can see it's about a 60-40 split. 60% are in favor of a waiver application, 40%, I'm sorry, 60% are not in favor, 40% are in favor. Next slide. And then if a waiver is submitted and approved, would you feel comfortable? And that, actually, this would be yourself going to school, not sending your child. And it would be about 56% said no, while 44% said yes, they would be comfortable. And the last slide. And so with the results, and the board will, I know, ensue a discussion, but staff would recommend, if board does decide to ask staff to submit a waiver, the suggested reopening date would be, we suggest October 5th. There is a mandated wait of 14 days. So once an application would be submitted, there is, you have to identify a target reopening date that's 14 days ahead of when you submit your application. And staff would be prepared to submit an application this week, should the board want to do so. And now I can take questions or have board discussion.
Okay, do we have any questions for Dr. Hayes?
Dr. Hayes, on the, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. On the question one, you mentioned that we surveyed the blended learning only parents. How many parents are not, or I'm sorry, parents, how many students are not taking part in the, or the blended learning, or did not want the blended learning?
Okay, well, first of all, we did not just survey blended learning parents. We were looking for a rapid turnaround time, because we knew we had to prepare for this board meeting and to give the board some feedback. So we sent it actually to all of our elementary parents, but we did clarify in the beginning and encouraged only blended learning parents to take it, because distance learning students would remain on distance learning regardless of a waiver. However, we are aware that likely, probably some distance learning parents took it, maybe misunderstood or took it anyway. But in general, it was 70% out of our elementary families, 70% chose the blended learning model and 30% chose the distance learning model. Now, those are rounded up, but that's in general what the percentages were.
So we got 1,755 responses back. How many students total are there in TK all the way to 5? Do you know roughly?
About 3. Yeah, it is about half of our students, a little over 3,000.
3,000 total. Okay, that's a good response rate back.
Do you have any other questions, Robert, or no?
I may have a few after.
Anybody else?
Dr. Hayes, thank you for giving us that update on that stuff. And I was glad to see about the no cost associated, giving the information about where people can get testing with no cost, and that if our employees need to get tested, that there is waivers for them with their healthcare plan. With the blended learning model, going back to school, when I know in elementary school, we're planning on doing the 2 small cohorts each day. So you would have roughly 14, 15 students in each class. Now we're enacting very strict screening prior to letting children on campus. I mean, actually anybody that comes on campus, including our employees. Is that correct?
That's correct. We chose to do, we had our task force, and we had the option of doing passive screening, but our task force of parents and staff were very adamant that we do active screening. And so, yes, to every district site, including the district office, employees have to have their temperature taken, and also are screened for any symptoms, and sign in. And we have sign in that they verify that someone took their temperature as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and those have been I'll call them safety parameters at this point. But those have been approved already by Ventura County Public Health, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's, I might have some more, but that's just kind of what I have off the top of my head right now. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else?
I do want to say that I had reached out to Public Health Director Rigoberto Vargas. I sent him some questions earlier, and I see that the questions just came back. But just to share, because I think you know, a lot of people were trying to understand why there's been no public schools that have applied for this. I know a lot of the private schools have applied, and a majority of them have been approved. And I had asked them if we've had any updates from the schools that have recently reopened from the school waiver, because I think that's important to see, you know, how they're doing. I know they have less students than we do, but I think it's important to see, are they having any issues? Have they had any concerns? And his response was that they have received no particular issues or concerns with regards to the recent schools that have opened. So that's a little comforting. I know it's still a little early, but that's good to know so far. I did ask him if any public schools have applied for the waiver program, and he did say no. I did ask him if Dr. Levin supports the school waivers. He said yes. And you know, he just gave me a little bit of history about our city. And so I think, you know, those are some good answers, you know, that I think the public would want to know, you know, in particular about what's happening out there. But you know, I too, Dr. Hayes, I appreciate all the work that you've done. It was a great presentation. And, you know, as Board Member Donabedian said, you know, you've been ready for this since before. And I think we were ready, you know, long before other schools were ready. So I appreciate all the work and that you and your team have put into this, and especially, you know, going forth with the waivers, and, you know, such a short amount of time, you had to get all these answers back to us. So thank you for that. And thank you for the surveys.
Welcome.
Just a comment of clarification for all our stakeholders. The parameters that Mr. Donabedian mentioned, I just want to reiterate for everyone's benefit, those are not arbitrary parameters, you know, the 10 days, the 14 days. Those are recognized by the state. So, you know, for all our shareholders, if they can take comfort in that, those were not made up. Those are recognized standards.
Correct. Yes, our safety protocols are based on state and county requirements, you know, state and county orders. And so all of our safety protocols have been, we've had to submit and get approvals for those. The waiver is, there's another step of, like, again, the stakeholder engagement that we talked about. And then we'll have to have site-specific movement plans. In other words, identifying like which class will use which restroom. And so that's what we will be doing. If the board wants us to go forward, we will be identifying and doing that work the rest, you know, this week. But that's the last component, the fine detail of actually moving kids around.
Dr. Hayes, my understanding is that our county numbers have been on the decline recently, and that we're looking for that magic number of 7 or below in order for schools to go back, or in order for schools to go to the blended learning model. With that said, last week we were about 7.8 and declining. The hopes were that we would be below 7.0 by this week, but we did have a spike recently. My understanding anyway, and maybe you could clarify for us, is that the main reason for the spike was an increase in cases in our county jail and in our residential care facilities or convalescent homes that are in the county. Originally, my understanding is that those numbers were not going to be factored into our positivity, you know, our positive numbers, but that recently that has been that's been factored in. And my understanding is that this is what's keeping us, at least temporarily, off, on the watch list for right now. Do you have any other information that you could speak to on that?
That is my understanding as well, that originally that data was going to be collected and used at the state level, but they are now having it included in county level. So our number basically held, I believe it went to 7.9 as a county, as opposed to going down towards 7 because we added that in. However, overall, the state is in a downward trend. I believe our county without that would likely have been, there's a pretty good chance we would have been off the watch list this week. So next week, I think that we will have Labor Day information, any kind of residual effect, if you will, from Labor Day gatherings. And so next Tuesday will also be, a telling number as well to continue to see if the data is on a downward trend.
Okay. If we do apply for this waiver, you'd be able to accomplish that, or your staff would be able to accomplish that by the end of the week, beginning of next week, sometime in there. I know that you've done some preliminary work on that already. If parents decide at some point, there are some parents that state that they may not be interested, even if given the option of going back to the blended model or going to the blended model. So if we do apply for this waiver and it is approved, the parents still have the option of continuing with distance learning if they want. That's my understanding, right?
Well, yes, if they're on the distance learning model, so we organized our students by distance learning and blended learning because we anticipated opening up at some point back in August when we were scheduling classes both at the elementary and secondary level. So those distance learning students will remain on distance learning. The blended learning students were told that to anticipate a return to school date. And in fact, we had anticipated, I believe, the Tuesday after Labor Day as our projected date. And so our parents are aware of that. And so those who selected the blended learning have been anticipating, I believe it looks like the data supports it, reopening schools to in-person when we were able to do so. Okay. So they would return. So it would be the blended learning model. Again, AM, PM cohorts, classes would be, maximum 12 to 14, depending on the size of the classroom, because we have to have 6 feet spacing between desks. So all of that will continue to apply. A waiver would not change any of those safety protocols.
Okay. We've got a large majority of the teachers are not for returning to the blended or going to the blended model. Is there anything that the county can do? Will they be able to offer any guidance or training for staff or for teachers that would help them or instruct them as to the best ways to go about with, with handling, this or teaching in this new model?
In terms of teaching, in terms of the safety requirements, yes, the county and the VCPH, Ventura County Public Health Department, they have offered to have our teachers work with their nurses to review the implementation of safety practices in the classroom that may be helpful for teachers to hear that. And we also have our district nurses who have been trained, and they are also, and we work with them closely, and they actually helped us and continue to help us with our safety protocols, our 2 district nurses.
Okay, so and then thank you very much for that. I'm sure that would be helpful if anybody had any questions or concerns that they could talk to the county about those protocols. I guess lastly, with the numbers in the state coming down, the numbers in the county were on the way down until this last spike at the jails and our residential care facilities. This is going to take approximately 3 weeks, about a week or so to submit the application. And then we have to give them a 14-day lead time as to the date of return, October 5th. In that time, do we have any feeling or any idea from Ventura County Public Health as to whether or not they anticipate the numbers going down to below 7 in the next 3 weeks or so, or they just are not making any predictions at all?
The last time I communicated with Dr. Levin's office, they were optimistic and hopeful, and were acknowledging a decline in the COVID cases, getting closer to the 7. So I do think there is an anticipation that I think it's realistic that there's a veritable chance that we could be removed from the watch list before a waiver, before that process is even fulfilled. I think that's realistic. It could coincide and be pretty timely that we would be off the watch list by then. I think Labor Day will have something to do with it. Those numbers, if they really spike up, it might take a couple more weeks out to get back down. But if they don't spike up, then I think there's a relatively, it's hard to predict. I don't want to be held to it, but I think there's a likelihood that we could get off the watch list within the next couple of weeks.
Dr. Hayes. So Rigo did provide a little bit of information sort of on that question in the lines, because I think it's important, I think, to see where we stand. And he actually did detail Moorpark for us here. And he said the case rate per 100,000 resident in the zip code of 93021 yesterday was 1,221. And that was lower than the county average of 1,368. He said, we looked into the case rate for the zip code for the current 7-day average report period ending of September 5th. And he said that the state, Moorpark had it better than the state and countywide. We were still just a little over 7%. So that's good. He says, reminder that even if it's lower for Moorpark, we still are based on the entire county. But I think that helps. He put a little bit of history on the bottom as to where Moorpark's been. So I think that helps, with where we stand in Moorpark personally.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe Moorpark is very, very close to 7. I think we have somebody did the math and verified that it was Mr. Donabedian. Do you want to?
Yeah,
take credit?
like what Robert said. We looked at the 14-day rate, which I think last was updated on the 14th, and we had like 26 cases. You take that with our population, you do the math, multiply it by 100,000, divide it by 1,000, and it gave us a rate of like 7.1%. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if there's the 4 tiers that we're in right now, once we move to the 3rd tier, which is at 7% or lower, we're blended learning at all of our school facilities, not just elementary school. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is correct. Yes. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, well, and there still is the 14-day period, so once we move to red, because we're in purple right now, once we move to red, you still maintain the average over the 14 days. But we had stated that we would be prepared that once we, surpass that 14, we would be ready to open. But so there is still a wait period so there's a wait period with the waiver, and there's also a wait period with, with being off the watch list.
Okay. And my understanding I understand that there's a lot of people that are concerned on both sides of it, and it's a tough conversation and decisions to make. But for us, if we move forward, this is going to the county health officials who have been the ones that have been making the safety regulations and restrictions and reopening things with safeguards in there. We're not charged with reopening the schools or not reopening the schools. We're just going to be submitting our information. They're the ones who are looking at the current 7 and 14-day health plans, like the 7-day number that Mr. Perez just shared. That didn't get updated today. So that's information that, we're not really privy to, but by them watching that, they can look at what's happening, and they can look at what happened post Labor Day. I would imagine that they're going to be their job to keep us safe. They're not going to want to make us do unnecessary risk. If they see a big spike in a trend, I think we'll see that even more, they may enact greater restrictions than are in place right now, not just at the school level. So that's something that I definitely think about and weigh in on in my decision making, and looking at where our community's at and where it's been. It definitely, we're right there at that point where, another week or two, there may not even be a need for a waiver at all. We're going to be right into that model, which fits their parameters. So.
Correct. And that would be for all of our schools.
Right. And like Mr. Sweet said, I mean, the big spike we heard today at the county board supervisor meeting was our jails and care facilities. And none of those are within a zip code that even touches our zip code. And I think that's important for all of us to really think about and take in. So.
Mhm.
And I think just to kind of dovetail into what Mr. Donamedian was saying is that, the county public health, they're the public health experts on, what's going on the numbers and all of that. And they've set the parameters as to what we're required to do, whether it's masks and testing and distancing and limiting the amount of students that are in the classroom, testing facilities, all of those. And what we're proposing is that we put all of the information that they've required and give it to them, and then they're going to decide whether or not we meet those parameters to be able to reopen safely in the TK through 5th grade levels. We were on the decline. Moore Park is just over that 7%, even though I understand that we're lumped in with, the border of Ventura County. But this is really their decision. I mean, we're going to provide them with the information that's required in the waiver, submit it, and they will make a final decision as to whether or not this is something that Moore Park Unified can do safely. And so that's kind of how I see it. I think that's basically what Mr. Donabini was saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then does anybody else have anything to add on that? Nothing? Okay. Then do we have any other questions or comments or anything like that on this subject? Okay, with that, then I'll offer a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the school waivers from TK through 5th grade.
With reopen date of October.
Yeah, with
5th.
the reopen date of October 5th. Is that what it was, Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, on a motion from Robert Perez, second by Scott Dettori, to submit our information and this waiver to Ventura County Public Health for their approval or denial with a tentative reopening date of October 5th. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, in that case, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0 to submit the waiver. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to item number 10 is report from district board members. We'll go from top to bottom of my screen here, which Mr. Dettori, you're up.
Well, actually have very little, actually have nothing to report other than trying to stay on top of all the COVID information. On a personal note, I've just been trained as a tracker contact tracer by the state of California. So I am readily and heavily and regularly involved in this program, and hoping that numbers are getting better for the state, and hope they keep going that way. That's it.
Thank you very much. I think we'll be able to use your services. Mr. Donabedian, you're next.
I just like to tell Mr. Dettori to stay out of my phone when you're tracking it. But no, kind of the same thing with I think all of us. We've been really just wrapped up and really examining the impacts of COVID and really kind of diving into what a waiver might mean for our students and our teachers. Other than that, I've just been like a lot of the other parents, trying to help the kids get through the day. It's been amazing to watch what our teachers are doing with them. I cannot even fathom the challenges that they're facing every day. But I know we're just like a lot of families. We have our good days and then we have our meltdowns, and sometimes the kids have their meltdowns too. But just appreciate what everyone's trying to do here. That's it.
Thank you very much. Robert Perez.
Yes, just want to echo. I've been able, having our kids at home, I've been able to listen and wake up to class at the early mornings of 7, and hear Raylene going into Avid, and listening to Miss Swenson. Just such enthusiasm, and waking up. All of us in the household with her energetic day. But then, of course, Robbie, is a freshman, and we're able to, I brought him to the funeral home with me the other day, and he did distance learning there. And he got a lot done. He was able to, interact and really, just focus and not have the distractions of course, the little kids running around. So I think he did very well, being away from that environment. And, I have to give kudos to all the moms out there that are, going from PE instructor to custodian to teacher's assistant. You guys are all doing such a great job. I had the opportunity to go to back to school night, and that was very nice. I have to say, I was still at work, and I was able to log in and have my both computers for both Raylene and Robbie on their back to school night, and then of course went to the elementary back to school night. I also went to the Boys and Girls Club 50th anniversary virtual auction. We've been supporting that every year, and it was nice to see our Boys and Girls Club students. They did such a great job at singing and dancing, and I was able to find a way to auction or to buy some items there as well. But really, that's all I have. I hope everybody's staying healthy, and it's good to see all of you here.
Thank you very much. Ms. Van Dam.
Nothing to report for school board business in the last week, but I do want to thank Dr. Hayes and her staff for all the hard work that you've put forward to, not only, your regular duties, but this waiver and the COVID and all the complexities to iron everything out. So I want to thank you for doing that. And on a personal note, my son, who's in the Marine Corps, had a couple days leave, so it was really nice to see him.
Okay, thank you very much. And I attended the back to school night at Moore Park High School on the 10th also. The teachers did an outstanding job at navigating Canvas and getting all the codes and passwords out to families, and talking about everything they're doing enthusiastically, and what their plan is for the students. And it sounds like they are more than making the best of a bad situation, but are truly excelling at what they do, which is a testament to their ability. So I really appreciate all of our teachers, and also along those lines, this waiver is not something that we take lightly. We're trying to consider everybody's opinion and feelings, and this is just an unprecedented time. And I understand that we say that all the time, and it gets old saying this over and over again, but we're trying to adapt and to do what is best for the students in our district, and make sure that it can be done safely and effectively for all of the employees and all the students and all the families that will be part of this reintroduction back into school, the blended first, and then eventually a full return to full-time school. So I appreciate everybody's feedback. This is not something that a decision that we make or take lightly. And I hope everybody understands where we are. We're trying to do what is best for students, parents, teachers, administrators, classified. So that's really it. So thank you very much for all the teachers and all they've done throughout this whole process. They're utmost professionals. And to all the administrators who've worked on the budgets and the waivers and keeping the lights on while we go through this difficult time. And that's it. So we'll see what happens in the next 3 weeks. Okay, with that said, we don't have any board items for action or discussion, looks like. Do we have any that? Okay. Then we'll move on to item number 12, which is the consent action. Items proposed for this consent calendar are noted on the posted agenda and are considered by the superintendent to be of a routine nature. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar at the request of any board member and placed under the appropriate action category. A roll call vote will be taken for the consent calendar so that any items requiring a roll call vote can be properly addressed. It's recommended that all consent items be approved. I'll entertain a motion.
Just have a quick question before we start. Item number 14 with the certificated employment. I have a family member that's on that on the substitute list. Would that make me have to recuse myself from item 14, Dr. Hayes, or would that be okay?
Dr. Hayes?
It actually is, it's fine to do that.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to verify. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will leave item number 14 as part of the consent calendar. That sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No other items that anyone would like to pull? Okay.
I'll make a motion
yes.
that we approve all consent items.
Okay.
I'll second.
On a motion from Robert Perez, seconded by Jeff Donabedian. Aurelia, will you call the roll?
Yes. Scott Dottori,
Aye.
Jeff Donabedian,
Aye.
Robert Perez,
Aye.
Nathan Sweet,
Aye.
Ute Van Dam.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 18. It's recommended that the board approve resolution number 2020-2021-2, reducing discontinuing services as classified positions due to lack of funds and or lack of work. This item reflects a reduction of 1 full-time equivalent position, 8 hours, transportation supervisor. Dr. Hayes?
Yes, thank you. Due to lack of work, cabinet and staff are recommending eliminating the position of transportation supervisor and combining the duties of this position with our current director of maintenance and operations. This is also a result of declining enrollment. We do have less students this year, which contribute to the lack of work for this position. And approval of this position would result in an annual savings of approximately $106,000. So staff is recommending this, and we do not anticipate any impact on level of service. And I'll explain further with the next items.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept the recommended reduction, discontinuing of service for the classified position.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, on a motion by Scott Dottori, seconded by Ute Van Dam to approve resolution number 2020-2021. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 5-0. Item number 19, a first reading will be held on the proposed revisions to the following job description: Director of Maintenance, Operations, and Transportation. Following the first reading, it is recommended that the board waive the second reading and approve the job description as presented. Dr. Hayes.
Okay, so with this, staff further recommends that the current job description for the Director of Maintenance and Operation be revised to include transportation duties and become the position of Director of Maintenance, Operation, and Transportation. This is a common director position in many school districts, and our current Director of M&O has transportation experience of supervising and of bus routes and determining bus routes and ridership with her other district. So we do recommend approving this first reading and waiving the second reading.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve and waive the second reading.
Second.
I heard Robert Perez on that. So I'll, on a motion from Ute Van Dam, second by Robert Perez, to approve of the revision to the job description, Director of Maintenance, Operations and Transportation, and waive the second reading. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 5-0. Moving on to item number 20. It's recommended that the board approve the addition of the Director of Maintenance, Operations and Transportation to range 32 to the management salary schedule. Dr. Hayes.
Thank you. Lastly, staff would recommend updating the management salary schedule to include the Director of MO&T to range 32, and also simultaneously eliminating the position of Transportation Supervisor on the management salary schedule. And the Director of MO&T would be compensated at the same rate as the Director of Technology and the Director of Fiscal Services. And again, this would result in a savings of approximately $106,000 annually.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the addition of the Director of MO&T to range 32.
Okay, a second.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 5-0. Item number 22, a public hearing is scheduled for 5:30 p.m. regarding the Moore Park Unified School District's learning continuity and attendance plan. Staff will make a presentation that describes the plan and its requirements. Members of the public may express their opinions on this matter by following board procedures for public comment. I'll open the hearing at 6:38. We have any
All right.
public comment?
Good evening. I believe this is my time to present. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, I was going to introduce you, Mrs. Herzog,
Okay.
our Director of Curriculum Instruction, Tammy Herzog. Take it away.
All righty. So, we were discussing all these fun plans that are a result of COVID-19. So this is a new plan. It's called the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. It is to replace the Local Control Accountability Plan, the old LCAP, for this school year. And this is the public hearing that will give you some information about this plan. In your board packet, you also received a copy of the actual plan itself, but this PowerPoint provides an overview of what you'll find in that plan. Next slide. All right. For the 2020-21 school year, the Learning Continuity Plan will be replacing the Local Control Accountability Plan. What is this? I'm going to refer to it as the LCP. The LCP is a comprehensive plan that replaces the old LCAP just for this school year. We will still be writing an LCAP later in the spring, but this will be the guiding document for this school year. The purpose of the LCP, it's a planning document that is intended to balance the needs of all stakeholders, including educators, parents, students, and community members in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. Input was gathered from stakeholders to develop this plan. A reopening task force was created in June of 2020 to discuss how to best go about opening schools in the fall. This reopening task force included parents, teachers, classified staff members, counselors, and administrators who volunteered their time to be part of this important planning process. The task force met together throughout the summer. At times, the task force was divided into smaller elementary and secondary groups, and those groups discussed needs specific to those particular grade spans. In addition to the input provided by the task force, input from community members, MUSD staff, parents, the English Language Advisory Committee, and the District English Language Advisory Committee, and information from the parent survey was used to create this document. Next slide. All right. Notes were taken during these stakeholder meetings and input was combined and compiled. The following 10 slides that you're going to see coming up highlight the most frequent suggestions shared by these stakeholder groups. These recommendations are the primary focus for the LCP. This first recommendation was to ensure staff are trained on safety protocols. Training was provided to all staff the week before school started. We went ahead and we added the 3 in-service days that normally would have taken place in October, January, and March to the beginning of the school year so that we could have 3 additional days for training. Those training days included all the necessary training on the safety protocols for COVID-19, as well as some of the other things we're going to discuss later in this presentation. Next slide. All right. Stakeholders felt it was important to have daily active screening rather than passive screening. I know Dr. Hayes mentioned that earlier today. As a result of that, we purchased a whole bunch of thermometers. So the no-touch thermometers were purchased and staff was trained on their use, including the calibration of these thermometers. Students, staff, and visitor temperatures will be taken upon campus entry, and staff and students will be asked to conduct passive screenings at home before leaving and coming to school each day. Next slide. Another stakeholder recommendation was the importance of purchasing safety equipment. MUSD purchased the following safety equipment to ensure safe in-person return to school for employees and students. Personal protective equipment, obviously, plexiglass partitions. I'm sure you've probably seen some of those in offices as you go around the school and the district. And those were placed in locations where 6 feet distancing wasn't always possible. Hand sanitizing and washing stations were purchased, and those have been distributed to the different school sites. Additional cleaning supplies and easy ups to increase options for outdoor instruction are also being purchased at this time. Next slide. All right, the need for reliable internet access and Chromebooks for all students was a top priority for distance learning, brought up in every single stakeholder group meeting we had. As a result, MUSD purchased 5,000 Chromebooks and an additional 100 hotspots. MUSD's newer touchscreen Chromebooks were sent out to STS to be serviced and cleaned. These were then passed out to MUSD's kindergarten students so that they would have access to a device with a touch screen. Because the other 5,000 we purchased don't have touch screens, and we wanted to make sure that our youngest learners have access to a device with a touch screen. All right, next slide. All right, our next stakeholder recommendation. Stakeholders wanted to make sure that all MUSD would provide a more rigorous distance learning program than was offered in the spring of 2020. You know, when we transitioned to distance learning in the spring, right as the pandemic started, this was something completely new to everyone. You know, we didn't have grading. We just tried to do the best we could with getting information out to students. And everybody recognized that if we're going to be returning to any sort of a distance learning environment, that there had to be a lot more rigorous instruction going on. So as a result, the following actions were put into place. We purchased a learning management system, which is called Canvas, so that we could host everything in one place for students. We purchased a plagiarism checker. Some of our teachers were concerned, especially at the high school level, about students doing their own work. And so we purchased that plagiarism checker. Professional development for teachers on Canvas was provided so that they were prepared to use this new program, as well as Turnitin.com. Lead teachers were paid over the summer to create units in Canvas to share with the staff so that when everybody returned in August, they at least had a place to start, like the first month worth of curriculum was created for all the different grade levels and subject matters, which really gave a nice jump start to the school year for the teachers. And a memorandum of understanding was created with the union to address the expectations for distance learning. Just for those of you who are listening and aren't sure about what an MOU is, it's an agreement that was negotiated with the teachers union outlining the expectations with staff, including daily live interaction with students and other pertinent details. Next slide. All right, our next stakeholder recommendation was to provide options for parents, because people have very different circumstances that they are dealing with at home. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to meet the needs of all families and students. So 3 instructional delivery models were created. We have the distance learning model, the blended learning model, an independent study, and schedules and information about each of these models was shared with families. And families had the opportunity to select the model that best met their needs. And Dr. Hayes and Mrs. Welch did a lovely road show. I believe it was in sometime in early July, and parents had a chance to hear about the different models and make an informed decision. My next slide. All righty, our next stakeholder recommendation was, or request was to provide some sort of childcare. Childcare for students during distance learning and for when students return for in-person learning was recommended. So Moorpark put the following in place. In collaboration with community agencies, and when we talk about community agencies, we're thinking specifically of like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, will be provided to families during distance learning and for blended learning students when they're not attending their in-person cohort. We have that going on at a couple sites right now. We have students that are being supervised by Y employees with a MOU we have with the Y, and then also the Boys and Girls Club. And then those will be able to continue when we return for in-person blended learning. Childcare and homework help will be offered for the students who are at greatest risk for learning loss, so that they will have priority to childcare that's offered by Moorpark Unified School District when we return for in-person learning. And then teachers needing childcare will be provided child-based childcare when they return to their work site. And we have a few teachers that are utilizing that childcare right now so that they're able to come into their classrooms and teach from their classrooms and have access to all their materials and supplies. And we'll also be able to look at offering CAP and Success Express and some of our after-school programs later on in this school year. We definitely have plans to get those things open back up as well. All right, next slide. All right, stakeholders wanted to ensure that learning loss that may have been resulted from the switch to distance learning in the spring of 2020 was appropriately addressed. These are some things that were put in place to ensure this. We will go in these in a little bit more detail later in the presentation, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the things that were put in place to try and mitigate this learning loss. First of all, an additional 9.6 secondary teachers were hired and 12 sections of 6/5 were added to allow for smaller class sizes. 4 additional elementary teachers were hired, 3 for distance learning, and then 1 additional teacher for the home independent study program. So we had many requests for that, more than we usually have. Principals and staff will be following the recommendations shared in the priority instructional content ELA literacy and mathematics document. This was put out by a group called Achieve the Core, and it'll help guide us in identifying which are the core content areas that need to be addressed, because we're not just going to go back and teach last year's standards. We need to teach this year's standards and make sure that we're accelerating progress and plugging these gaps and holes and moving students forward. So we'll be using this guiding document to help us with that. Local diagnostic assessments and educational software will be used to digitally assess students, and teachers will teach live daily lessons to all students during distance learning and when we return to in-person blended learning as well. Next slide. All right. All stakeholders recognize the importance of addressing the needs of the whole child, including providing social emotional supports to students during this challenging time and ensuring their social emotional well-being. MUSD is doing the following things to address this particular need. The staff is going to be trained on CASEL social emotional roadmap. There's going to be, we wanted to make sure that we offered the blended learning model so that students that need that in-person connection can have that in-person connection as soon as possible. Teachers will teach live daily lessons and provide opportunities for students to interact not just with the teacher, but with each other, with their peers through group projects. Counselors will offer virtual and in-person counseling sessions. And then social emotional resources are posted on the MUSD website for families needing different resources. There's a wealth of things out there for families, and they've been posted and shared. There's a special social emotional link on the website, and there are so many different resources there for families. And then our next one, ELAC and DLAC parent advisor groups, as well as teachers and staff, recognize the need to address the English language acquisition loss that our English learners will most likely be experiencing. Remember, our English learners students weren't hearing English at home, many of them, for all this time. And so they're, it's likely to assume that there would be some sort of language loss during this time period. So these are things we will be doing to try and mitigate that loss. Rosetta Stone English was purchased for individualized ELD practice. So that's a digital online program that students can progress at their own pace in. So this would be in addition to their regular core curriculum. ELD Teacher on Special Assignment will support teachers with the creation of high quality standards-based ELD lessons. And also the TOSA has been busy pre-recording lessons that are specific to certain grade levels and creating a library of ELD lessons that teachers can refer their students to for additional practice. So these are some things that we're doing to ensure that we're mitigating that language acquisition loss that we're imagining is happening for our students. All right, we're to the next section of the plan. The next section of the plan addresses continuity of learning. Slides 15 through 18 address actions related to in-person instructional offerings, and then slides 19 through 21 will address actions related to distance learning. These actions represent the stakeholder recommendations that were implemented and that had CARES Act expenditures related to them. So the items in this plan are being funded not through the old LCFF funding. These items are being funded specifically through the CARES Act. Okay, so this plan addresses CARES Act funding. These are specific things that we're spending MUSD CARES Act funding on. All right, next slide. All right, actions related to in-person instructional offerings. Like I said before, personal protective equipment was purchased that included washable face masks, disposable gowns, and disposable gloves. I think, Aurelia, I saw some really great disposable gloves on your desk earlier today. These will be provided to all school sites in the district office to ensure students and staff are able to return to school safely. No-touch thermometers and thermometer batteries were purchased. So staff and students can be actively screened for a fever, as common a fever is a common COVID-19 symptom. And we want them to be screened each day as they enter campus or the school site. All right, more actions related to in-person instructional offerings. MUSD will promote behaviors that reduce exposure and spread of COVID-19. Health and safety signage was purchased. I'm sure you probably saw that as you've been out and about in the district office, which included signs with information about recognizing symptoms of COVID-19, those big round ground stickers that you're seeing on the ground that denote social distancing of 6 feet, where people assemble, and signs with directions for hand washing procedures and other pertinent COVID-19 information. And then childcare homework help for blended learning students at greatest risk for learning loss will be provided when they return for in-person instruction. We want to make sure that some of those students that are at greatest risk, some of our foster and homeless youth, would probably have first priority, and then some of our English learner students would have access to homework help. So perhaps when they're not in their blended in-person cohort, they could be in another classroom on site getting help with their homework and with some tutoring that they might need to catch them up. All right, next slide. More actions related to in-person instructional offerings are on this slide. We wanted to make sure we had all the required trainings for employees. They had training to identify the spread and prevention of COVID-19, training on recognizing symptoms of COVID-19, determining what to do if you become sick with COVID-19, enhanced sanitation practices, physical distancing, and how to wear PPE face coverings. Currently, all employees and students are required to wear face coverings. Barrier posts for playgrounds were purchased to ensure that access to shared playground equipment is not possible until public health guidelines begin to allow access. So those have been put in place. MUSD's Maintenance and Operation Department created the COVID-19 cleaning overview. It's very comprehensive. It's located on the homepage of the MUSD website. I believe it was shared last week at the school board meeting. It includes specific cleaning procedures for when students return for in-person instruction. And then we also purchased additional disinfecting products and such so that we would be prepared to meet this need. All righty, slide 18. More actions related to in-person instruction. Additional custodial staff will be hired to support sanitizing and disinfecting. Temporary structures to expand outdoor spaces such as easy-ups will be purchased so that we can have more outdoor spaces for students. The hand washing stations and hand sanitizers will be purchased for all school sites in the district office. Hydration stations will be purchased and are being purchased as we speak. And then we purchased some isolation room curtains so that there could be partitions between students when ill. And then also each school site has identified a separate site for students who are exhibiting COVID-19-like symptoms to be isolated until they can be picked up by parents once we return for in-person instruction. All right, now moving on to slide 19, this is where we're going to look at distance learning and the actions put in place to support distance learning. And again, these are actions that have costs to them. So the first one is obviously a big one. That's the one-to-one devices that were purchased to allow students to participate in daily live instruction through Google Meets, to access digital content and to provide them with access to virtual social emotional resources and support. And then additionally, purchased 100 more hotspots, and then the internet connectivity that goes with them because we need to pay monthly for that internet service provider. Slide 20, teachers were provided with Canvas professional development to get them ready to go for the school year with utilizing the Canvas learning management system. So that's been put in place. I'm sure if you have students within the district, you've probably seen that in action. And then Tier 1 and 2 technology help desk support is being provided in English and Spanish. So when students get stuck at home, there's a hotline they can call. And that puts them in touch with someone in either English or Spanish that can walk them through and help problem solve, and then direct them to the right place if they need higher levels of support. And 21, distance learning continued. Projectors and teacher laptops with cameras were purchased to assist teachers with distance learning lesson presentation. The old teacher laptops did not have cameras, most of them. And so it's really important for our teachers, if they're going to be live, for the students to be able to see their faces. So that was definitely a needed purchase, as well as the projectors so that they could be projecting while they're presenting. And then connectivity for the community childcare center located at the Boys and Girls Club was provided. We have many students who need childcare that are at the Boys and Girls Club over there off of Walnut Canyon. And they didn't have any access to the internet. And so since they're doing their classes live from there every day, they needed that internet access. So we assisted the Boys and Girls Club with internet access over there. All right, pupil learning loss. I feel like I'm talking a lot. This is not good lesson presentation skills, but I guess we have to do it to get this done. So pupil learning loss. The next section of the LCP addresses potential learning loss from the switch to distance learning during the spring of 2020. This slide discusses the primary subject areas that are addressed in the plan, which details how students will be assessed and how ongoing progress monitoring will take place. So you can see they specifically spell out what are we going to do for ELD, what are we going to do for math, and then what are we going to do for English language arts. So for ELD, some of the additional things we're doing to support learning loss, we've kind of already touched on with the additional Rosetta Stone English licenses. We also bought Rosetta Stone Foundations licenses for our secondary students. And then the ELD TOSA is going to be assisting the teachers. It's challenging to create ELD lessons. They're not like your standard lesson because there needs to be so much interaction and sentence frames, and they need to be structured in a certain way. And so it's nice to be able to have her expertise to offer to our teachers as they're creating those lessons. Math, we purchased the ESGI curriculum. That stands for Education Software for Guiding Instruction for elementary students. This is a one-on-one digital assessment tool so that teachers can assess their students. Usually when a student comes back at the beginning of the school year, the teachers, especially in the younger grades, are pulling the kids back individually and they're giving them a whole battery of assessments to figure out where they're at so that they can target instruction. And so we recognized that that was going to be very difficult in a virtual setting. And so this software was purchased for those teachers so that they can actually do that assessment digitally. So that's a nice addition. Obviously, we're going to use publisher and teacher created diagnostic assessments at different grade levels and subject matter areas. And then digital programs, including MobyMax, MathXL, iExcel, they all have diagnostic components to them, as well as ongoing progress monitoring that we can use as well for this purpose. And then language arts, the ELA, lots of different ELA tools we have. We're going to use the basic skills, basic phonics skills tests, MobyMax digital reading and writing assessments, the Scholastic reading inventory, reading miscues, reading counts, and some of those CASP interim assessment blocks as well. All right, next slide. All right, just like with the LCAP, where we have to discuss specifically what we're doing for unduplicated students, in the LCP, we have to address students with unique needs. These are the 5 student groups that need to be called out specifically within the LCP as to what we're doing to address their potential learning loss as a result of distance learning in the spring of 2020 school year, and also just as we work in this virtual environment. So the first group would be the English learners. We said Rosetta Stone English was purchased. The bilingual academic support liaisons are being offered at the middle school level to help reach out and communicate with the parents of our Spanish-speaking students and support them. We're going to be offering them homework help, tutoring, small group interventions, and then obviously the lower class size will benefit everyone because it gives teachers the opportunity to pull small groups and work with those students who have, on their specific areas of deficiencies potentially. Low-income pupils, we'll be offering our Title I parent meetings to keep them abreast of everything that's going on and offer them support, homework help, tutoring, and then the lower class size as well. For our foster youth, we have a foster youth liaison who provides foster youth information to all of our counselors and admins so that they can monitor our foster youth and check in with them. And we're also going to be providing them with additional homework help. They'll probably be the ones that are doing the childcare, having that additional support and tutoring, and then lower class size. Pupils with exceptional needs. We're looking specifically at students with disabilities here. So your special education students. We're inviting our very neediest students with disabilities back starting next week. So that's something additional that we're going to be providing them with additional time face-to-face if they choose. We've also purchased a digital diagnostic program specifically for identifying the needs of students with disabilities. And they're already using that program, and the teachers and psychologists are liking that quite well. Lower class sizes, personal distance learning plans were created for each student. So the special ed department has been really hard at work this summer. They had to create a special learning plan for each individual student and share that and send it home for distance learning. So a lot of work being done over there with students with disabilities. And then lastly, our pupils experiencing homelessness. We have a homeless liaison who's been supporting our students. He's actually been driving out to one of our students who lives in a car out in a nursery and helping out with that, bringing things to the family. Transportation will be provided for homeless students when we return to school if they need it, backpacks, homework help, tutoring, and then the lower class size. Okay, let me see. Next slide. MESD used CARES Act funding to put the following actions in place, which will help address pupil learning loss. So here's our 4 elementary distance learning teachers, an expanded elementary home independent study that it's going to include 1 additional teacher now. An additional 9.6, which is a huge number, of secondary teachers were hired, and 12 sections of 6/5 were added to allow for lower class sizes. The lower class sizes will allow for intensive small group intervention and more personalized instruction to help mitigate learning loss and accelerate learning. Again, we purchased the Rosetta Stone licenses for designated ELD and the ESGI digital assessment tools for ELA and math. And we also used this funding to purchase the digital special education assessment tool as well. All right, moving on to mental health and well-being. By the way, you're doing a great job, Thomas. Thank you. That's probably hard to follow along. I appreciate it. Mental health and social emotional well-being will be areas of focus during distance and in-person learning. Staff has been receiving training using the resources listed on this slide. You can see those above here. And counselors and psychologists have been reaching out to students and meeting virtually with them on a daily basis already. Already just at the very beginning of the school year, the counselors were calling all the high school students and helping with schedule request changes and social emotional needs as they have been arising. So we've been very blessed to have such an active counseling staff, and they've been really working hard to reach out to our students and making sure that we're taking care of that whole child. All right, pupil and family engagement and outreach. Ensuring student attendance and engagement is extremely important during distance learning, as we know. California school districts are actually required to have teachers record daily attendance and engagement. A student will be marked distance learning present if they attend the Google Meet, or if they complete the work assigned that day, or meet any of the other forms of engagement listed. This is something new. So teachers used to just have to go ahead and record present or absent in attendance, and our teachers have stepped up to the plate. It's a big new requirement from the state. They now have to record attendance and engagement for each of their students each day, which is, a few extra steps. But the idea behind this is that if a student maybe has technical problems and isn't able to access the Google Meet, we don't want to penalize that student. If they still complete the work, they should still get credit for being there. Or if a family has an emergency or an essential worker needs to take a child to work with them or something, that the child can still complete the work and get credit for it. So attendance will be taken daily at the beginning of each class period. It'll be reported in Q, the student information system. We've developed a tiered system that has been put in place for outreach for students not attending. So, a systematic approach for dealing with those students who are not attending on a daily basis. Training videos were created and shared with teachers, and chronic absenteeism will continue to be tracked just like it usually is. And then for the engagement piece, student engagement will be entered in the Q information system every single day. Training videos were also created for how to do this engagement, because it's an entirely new process for our teachers. And the student engagement can include any of the following. So a student can be marked present if any of the following things happened. So not that they just were present. So obviously, if they attend the Google Meet, they are marked present. If they academic homework assistance, if they got help with something like in a small group, they can be marked present. If there was a wellness check for accessibility, so if a counselor reached out, or if the student or parent reached out and said, look, we couldn't get on today, the internet crashed, my kid did the work, as long as they do the work, that still would count as being present. The teacher would then need to go back and mark that student present. And they have up until 5 days to do that. Wellness check mental health. If for some reason the student had some sort of an anxiety issue, or there's something going on that they weren't able to log into that Google Meet, as long as they do that work, again, they can still get credit for having been there. And then the teacher would go back in and change that attendance to distance learning present. And then also wellness check for physical health. So even if a student, let's say, tests positive for COVID and is at home and has mild symptoms, they can still be participating. If they don't feel comfortable getting on the Google Meet, let's say, because they have a cough, as long as they're doing the work, that's been posted on Canvas, and they're turning that work in that was required for that school day, then they would get credit for being in attendance. So lots of new things down the pipeline for everybody to learn and wrap their heads around. I think that we're all still kind of in the learning process with this, but we're very thankful to our teachers because it's definitely a lot of extra steps for them. All right, school nutrition. All right. The MUSD Food Services Department has been hard at work ensuring that all students have access to healthy meals. This process for serving meals will continue when we return for in-person blended learning. So MUSD will be serving breakfast and lunch in the grab-and-go style every day at every site. And they're doing that from 11 o'clock a.m. to 12:30 p.m. In the past, they were just serving at Flory, but they've now opened that up to all school sites. All individuals with disabilities or individuals age 18 or under will be provided a meal during the designated pickup time. So it's not just students on free and reduced lunch. It's any student or any person that's 18 years of age or under, and then also anyone that has a disability. This method for food service will be done during distance learning, and then we'll continue with this when we return for in-person blended learning. And employees will be assigned workstations that facilitate social distancing. They're going to be wearing masks and gloves, and they'll follow all cleaning and disinfecting protocols established in the MUSD cleaning overview. All right, so like just as in the LCAP, we have to talk about increased and improved services for our unduplicated students. We have to also discuss what increased and improved services are going to be provided for our unduplicated students in this plan as well. So we have the following services, and these will be principally directed to support the needs of our unduplicated students. So before, during, and after school interventions will be provided for these students. Additional counseling support will be provided for our unduplicated students. Like I said, our foster youth and our homeless liaisons. And then we have our bilingual academic support liaisons. So there are a lot of people that are reaching out and interfacing with our students, our unduplicated students. And then homework help and tutoring. Once we return for in-person learning, we'll definitely be providing those additional supports to make sure that we can catch those students up and accelerate that learning process to help mitigate that learning loss from the spring of 2020. And also just because we've been on this distance learning just to start out the fall. All right, so now we come to the questions part. I know I spoke a lot, and I'm not sure what kind of questions you might have, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have at this time.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I just have a question about the Rosetta Stone program. I mean, how exactly does that work? Because I remember in the olden days, you buy the discs from Costco and you learn on your own computer. So how would that work with our students?
So we have licenses, and they're assigned to individual students. So that way they can progress at their own rate. The younger students are using the Rosetta Stone English program, and then the older students are using the Rosetta Stone Foundations. The Foundations one is more like the one that you would purchase if you wanted to learn, let's say Spanish before you went on a trip to Mexico or something. And then the Rosetta Stone English, it assesses the kids where they're at. It's more of a primary program for our younger students.
Thank you.
Tammy, great presentation. Thank you. I think you answered
a
lot of the you answered a lot of questions, but you also taught us a lot tonight. As far as the hotspots, how does that process work for the families or the students that they don't have access to the internet?
Well, we have an application process. They need to notify the school if they need a hotspot, and then we have lists. We were trying to prioritize those lists, but we're just basically anybody who needs one, we're trying to get them to them as soon as possible. They were back ordered at the beginning of the school year. It's, unfortunately, we have like a supply and demand sort of an issue with hotspots because everybody needs them. And then once you get them, then you have to make them talk or work with our firewall. So you want them to not to like anything that our firewall would block. We want these hotspots to block as well. So Thomas works his magic down there in technology, and they have to do some things to those so that they're ready to send out. And then also we have to work with the provider, I'm not sure if we're using Verizon. I think we're using Verizon as our provider, but work with them to get those hotspots set up and then pay those monthly service fees.
I know a lot of parents are grateful. Many of them didn't expect Chromebooks, let alone hotspots. So they've just been so grateful with everything, that all of you have done for the Moorpark students. I ran into a couple of parents, moms over the weekend, and they were saying, well, we're having some difficulty getting online or connecting to our internet. And, they don't want to bother the district. They said, you know what, we'll just use our own personal computer. And I said, well, there's a hotline. And there's a hotline. Yes, you can call. They can walk you through. I know I've had some challenges with our gadgets, and they were repaired within the day. So I'm grateful for our technology department, grateful for everyone that has just stepped up and helped really the unknown, because we've been facing that every day. So I appreciate this presentation, learned a lot, and thank you so much for providing this to us tonight.
Thank you. And honestly, kudos to technology. And, poor David Roberts, he just had a baby, which is super exciting. And here he is trying to manage this, huge project of launching these 5,000 Chromebooks and these, all these hotspots. And, then Thomas is helping and stepping in. And we have just had an amazing group of people working for us through IT. I mean, they have been here all hours of the night. And honestly, hats off to them. I can't even imagine doing their job. They have done a really, really good job. So thank you, Thomas. And David, if you're listening.
Anybody else with any comments or questions?
Yeah, I just would like to echo what Robert said. Tammy, kudos to you and all your staff and everyone. That's a tremendous amount of work that you have done, and not under the best of circumstances. So I know I speak for many when we say a really heartfelt thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's sweet of you guys. I appreciate it. We do it for the kids.
Anybody else? Anything to add?
I just reiterate like what Mr. Dettori said to Tammy and the technology team. I don't think that any of us could even fathom the amount of work that everyone has put in to deliver education to our kids this year. It seems so seamless, but I know it's not. There's a lot of work going on. I have one question in regards to returning to school with the PPE and like the partitions and all that. Are our school sites set up for that right now, or is that something that we'll implement as we see those like the rates come in and we have time to open?
It's pretty much set up. Now we're going to be purchasing additional PPE, but we already have a stash. I'm assuming that once we return to in-person instruction, as we start going through our PPE, we'll need to order more, would be my guess. But like the partitions in the offices have all been, put up in this summer. I don't think there's many partitions that would be put up at this point. There certainly is a plexiglass shortage. And it's expensive. So it's not like we'd be able to put it up between each desk. Our desks are going to be, spaced at 6 feet apart. So we wouldn't need those partitions anyways. So I think that, we're pretty much set as far as most of this is concerned. And it's pretty much ready to go. We're hoping for a September 7th launch. So that's our original timeline we were working with trying to make sure we had everything in place. So we should be pretty well good to go. I hope.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And again, the amount of effort and stuff you guys have put in has been nothing short of amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for addressing the topic that I hear most. And I think as a parent, I have also the topic of ensuring that the learning loss from last year is mitigated, and also the social emotional health. You hear a lot about those concerns with parents also. So I appreciate you addressing those two main concerns. And what will the passive screening look like? Is that going to be an online survey that students will have to fill out before going to school, or what does that process look like?
I can answer that. That process, that's actually the parents are trained. It's not a survey. It's they will do. They're encouraged to take the temperature of their own students at home, because they're told that, once they get to school, if they have a temperature, they'll have to go back home or go to a health clinic. And they're also taught, we have videos to teach them how to screen for symptoms. So that is, we don't formally track the passive screening at home, but we train the parents to do so because it's in everyone's best interest, because then when the student gets to school, they won't have to take their child back home if they missed any symptoms or fever.
Okay. Thank you. And then lastly, maybe Dr. Hayes, maybe you can answer this one also, is we had some public comments last week about the security software, that there seemed to be either some gaps or maybe complaints that it was insufficient to allow access, and it was allowing access to some of unwanted sites by students. Have we addressed that, or are we in the process of doing that?
Yes, we have. So there is a screening, and it was a family type of screening, and families who requested. We've had some individual requests to have more thicker, if you will, or more secure firewalls. And our technology team has helped our families individually install the software to more strictly limit access to various apps, et cetera. So some families are it just basically it can be catered to families' needs. And that's something that Mr. Roberts, our technology director, worked on, and we got that. It's like a community family firewall plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Anybody else, any other comments or questions? Okay, in that case, I'll close the hearing at 7:23. Thank you very much, Ms. Herzog, for your presentation.
My pleasure.
All right, and moving on to item number 23. Actually, we'll open the hearing at 7:23. Public hearing is scheduled for 5:30, which is now 7:23, to allow public input regarding the sufficiency of instructional materials in the school district in compliance with Education Code 60119, and to make a determination through a resolution as to whether each pupil in each school in the district has or will have within 2 months of the start of the 2020-2021 school year sufficient textbooks or instructional materials, or both. In each subject, they are consistent with the content and cycles of the curriculum framework adopted by the state board in mathematics, science, and history and social science, English language arts, foreign language, and health. Members of the public may express their opinions on this matter by following board procedures for public comment. Aurelia, do we have any public comment for this hearing?
Where am I at?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, terrific. In that case, we'll close the hearing at 7:25. Subsequent to the public hearing, it's recommended that the board adopt resolution number 2020-2021-3, textbook and instructional materials compliance. It is further recommended that the board certify that as of this date, each pupil in the district in kindergarten through grade 12 has been provided with a standards aligned textbook or basic instructional materials in each of the following areas: history, social science, mathematics, English, language arts, including the English language development component of an adopted program, and science. For students in TK to 8, the instructional materials were purchased for an approved standards aligned state adoption list as required by CCR Title 5, Section 9531. For students in grades 9 through 12, the instructional materials were adopted by the local governing board following district review of the materials and their alignment with state content standards as required by CCR Title 5, Section 9531. Lastly, it's recommended that the board certify that each pupil enrolled in a foreign language or health course has been provided with a textbook or instructional materials that are consistent with the content and cycles of the curriculum frameworks adopted by the state board for those subjects, and that laboratory science equipment as applicable to science laboratory courses offered in grades 9 through 12 is available to pupils in those grades. Dr. Hayes.
Yes, the public hearing and the resolution is a requirement that does occur annually, and it ensures, or board action would ensure that we have adequate instructional materials for the subject matters listed. This is related to the Williams Act, and it basically shows that we have sufficient instructional materials for all of our students.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-2021-03 regarding sufficiency of instructional materials. And I believe that all of the things included in the action item are included in the resolution. So just an adoption of the
Second that.
resolution.
Okay. A motion from Jeff Donabedian, second by Robert Perez. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Item number 24, the California Department of Education Early Learning and Care Division requires official board action to close all district preschool programs concurrent with the LEA's PK to 12 campuses. Therefore, it is recommended that the board take action to officially close all Moorpark USD preschool programs effective March 16th, 2020 until such time as a plan for a safe reopening of all early learning and care programs is possible. The reopening will take place no later than when the LEA campuses open for in-person instruction. Dr. Hayes.
Yes, so the California Department of Education is requiring that the local school boards take action to close preschool programs. If you recall, on March 13th, 2020, the board did not have to take action to close our schools. That was mandated by the state. But in this case, in order to maintain our preschool funding from the state during distance learning, local school boards need to take action to officially close the preschools to ensure, the flow of funding. And once we reopen to in-person learning, and that would also include a waiver if we decided, if it's approved and only a waiver, and we didn't have all the schools open, we could open up our preschools as well.
Okay, and just for clarification, this doesn't change anything that we're doing currently. This is just retroactive.
Right. It is retroactive. It is a funding. This is ensuring continued funding for our preschools to remain closed. So in other words, the board's taking action to allow them to be closed until our schools open to in person. And that action will then continue or guarantee the continuity of our funding for the preschools during distance learning. Otherwise, without board action, it could jeopardize preschool funding during distance learning.
Okay. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to officially close all Moorpark USD preschool programs effective back to March 16th, 2020 until we have a plan for a safe reopening of all learning and care programs.
Second.
Okay, on a motion from Jeff Donabedian, second by Ute Van Dam. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 25, it's recommended that the board approve the unaudited actuals for 2019-2020. Dr. Hayes.
Yes, I would like to introduce Pearl Azuka, who is going to present the unaudited actuals, and then we'll entertain questions and discussion after.
Good evening, board members and members of the cabinet and members of the public. It's my pleasure tonight to bring to you the unaudited actuals and just a few words of what this report is. We'll go into a little more detail, but it's an accounting. It's looking backwards, basically, as to how we spent. The books are closed for 2019-20, and this report is sharing with you how we ended the 2019-20 year. It's considered unaudited because they have not been these numbers haven't been audited by our independent auditor. Following this presentation, then this will go to our auditors, who will then go through the process of doing their review, and they will come back to you, I believe, in December to present their audit report, and this will finalize the cycle. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. So this is basically the cycle for our budget. And you can see September, this is basically ending the 2019-20 year. And then we then start, the next thing is we'll jump into the budget for this coming year. So as part of the financial documents that we present to you, this actually ends that cycle for last year. Okay, next slide. So again, this is just all the points as to what the unaudited actuals are. You have in front of you a couple 100-page document that's in the California for School State Account Code Structure format. We've also done a summary for you that's a little bit user-friendly to kind of get a general idea of how we, how we started, the revenue that came in, the expenditures that went out, and how we ended the year. And then, as I mentioned, the auditors will be reviewing this. And I also want to mention that when you approved the budget for this year, you were given and estimated as to how you, we were estimating how we were going to be ending the year. And so you had that first glance at it, and now this is the final. And it is required by California law that we submit this report, and it's to be filed with the county superintendent of schools by today. We got a pre-read, we can turn it in tomorrow, knowing that we're looking at it tonight. So with that, next page. So this gives big picture as to how we ended last year. Our major source of revenue, LCFF, Local Control Funding Formula, is our major source of dollars. Again, this is a combination of state apportionment as well as our local property taxes, and it's driven by ADA, average daily attendance. Again, because of COVID, we were able to, we were not held harmless this year, nor this year, for funding in this particular area. So you can see there that the majority of our funding does come from the state. And so as I have always said, that when the state starts to have financial difficulties, schools feel it immediately, because their sources of revenue come from the state. Then we receive in federal funds 1.9 million, other state funds, and this is like special education, lottery, mandated costs, those items, 2.6 million. And then lastly, local revenue. This is interest money, monies that we get from our local SELPA for funding our programs for special ed. They come in as local revenue. So we received in total 65.4 million in revenue. And then the next is a chart that you're used to seeing that breaks out how our revenue is. And you can see 86% of our monies that come from the state. Again, it's state and local property taxes together makes up the majority of our funds. And so we obviously pay close attention to how the governor rolls out his budget for schools, because we're directly affected by that. The next slide shows us our expenditures. And this lines out generally all the, both unrestricted and restricted, all of our expenses, and certificate salaries are 26, classified are 10.8, benefits are 17 million. And those three numbers, and we'll see it on the next page, how much they make up the majority of our budget. We have also books and supplies, services and other expenditures. And in this particular category, this is where our utility costs are, our other service contractors and so forth are in this particular category. And then our capital outlay, any items that we buy that we have to keep an inventory on that are over 5,000, I believe is the number. And lastly, any outgoes that we go to other funds. So our total expenses were $66.3 million. So, and this is the next slide where you can see when you add up the certificated and classified salaries and the benefits were, close to 80-something%. And so that makes up the majority of our expenses. And that's why when we're looking to make reductions, unfortunately, we can't cut enough books and supplies to even make a dent in our budget. So we always have to, unfortunately, look at our people. It's a people business, and it's unfortunate that's where we have to go, but that's where our majority of our expenses are. And then the next slide kind of summarizes everything. So we had a total revenue come in at 65.4 million. Our expenditures were 66.3, which shows that we had a deficiency of our expenses over our revenue of about 900,000. We began the year at 7.4 million. If you subtract that 895,709, our ending balance for this for 1920 is 6.5 million. This is important for us to note because this is our beginning balance for this year. So that's the tie-in for budget for 2021. And the county looks at that in terms of how we are starting out this year, especially in comparison to what we estimated. We actually estimated a little bit lower than this, that our ending fund balance was going to be less than 6.5. It was actually going to be less. So we did a little bit better, and a lot of that is because of COVID and not expending all those areas that we thought we would be doing. And the next slide. And so our next steps, we'll recommend that you accept and approve the unaudited actuals. We're going to go ahead and turn those into Ventura County Office of Ed. I'll be back in December to present to you the first interim report. And also in December, we'll have an audit presentation that will review these numbers that I just shared with you, and they'll turn from unaudited to audited numbers. We'll look forward to hearing what the governor's going to do with our education budget in January. We'll do the second interim, and we'll make a revision in May, and then in June, bring the budget and the LCAP, assuming that's the sequence that's going to happen next year for you. So with that, I believe that's it. I'll take any questions. I think that there's one more slide for questions, but right, and I recommend that you go ahead and approve this so that we can go ahead and file this with the county. I'll take any of your questions. I'll do my best. I just jumped in. If I can, I'll answer it. If not, I promise I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I don't know the numbers as intimately as I'd like to, but I'm certainly willing to take your questions and do what I can.
Thank you, Pearl. I really appreciate you doing this. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
I have just a quick question, but also a comment. One, thank you for coming back in and helping us through this time. It's appreciated, and it's nice for us to know that you are familiar with us and our processes and all that. So thank you again. I guess my questions are just, I know it wasn't really in the slide presentation, but just in case people are looking at some of the changes from the budget adoption to the unaudited actuals. And you kind of alluded to it, but I just wanted to kind of more put it in the public comment. A lot of these are due to the decreased costs with some of the COVID related stuff. We didn't spend as much as we anticipated on substitutes. Our utility bills were obviously drastically reduced and things like that. Were there any other major factors that you saw or Dr. Hayes saw that would factor into that?
Well, there is a couple of things. There were some revenue sources that we thought we were going to see, but it turns out, especially the EPA funds, which is the Education Protection Act, we thought we were actually given 2.4 million more. And this is a pot of money that is allocated from the state based on personal income tax. I think it was passed in 2016. where it's separated, it's its own pot of money. And we actually have received this money, and then they did an accounting, I believe in June, that basically said that you were overpaid because of it's personal income tax. And as I mentioned to you, when the finances of the state go down, then everybody is affected by that. And that's exactly what happened. They had estimated that we were going to be getting more. And when they did the accounting, the personal income taxes didn't come in like we thought. So we lost, we were over, I guess they had overpaid us by 2.4 million. Had that not happened, we would not have seen the deficit spending that we saw. But it did help a lot, especially in comparison to what we were planning on for 2019-20, with the lowered expenses of utilities and sub costs and consumables that we did not have to spend because of COVID. So.
Yeah, we were basically closed for almost 3 months, from March 13th to the end of June. So we saved our consumables, materials that we would use, also transportation. That's a fairly significant expenditure for districts, maintaining the buses and fuel, and then like substitute teachers. And then the largest savings was electricity for utilities for our buildings. So that did help offset that 2.4 million that we did not get.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you both for that. And then just one more quick, I think maybe more for Dr. Hayes, since you've been here a little longer than Pearl, but with some of this, I guess, changes that we've seen in the budget with, like, you might see like an increase in salaries on one end of it, but you see like a decrease in another area over the last couple of years. A lot of those have been in place due to like vacancy positions. I know we've had turnover at like the director of technology. We've had some consultants come in and out to help us along. Would that be more or less fair to say if someone's looking at those changes over time?
Yes, exactly that. So you may look at the 2019-2020 budget, for example, and look at what classified management or certificated management salaries were budgeted, and then looking at the 2021 budget, notice that there was a percentage increase. That does not reflect any salary increases to those positions. What that does reflect in our case is that in 2019-2020, we had in the classified area, we had a vacancy director of technology for several months while we were recruiting a director of technology. So that monthly savings is cost savings to the tune of about $22,000, I believe. So that equated to a 2% increase in the 2021 budget because we fully funded that position. So in 1920, we didn't pay that, we had a vacancy, so we saved that money. So when we close the books, it looks like it's a decrease in less amount than 2021 because we're fully funding that position now. And in the certificated, you'll notice that it was a larger increase in 2021. And that is because we had several certificated management vacancies for several months. We had a high school AP, we had high school Moore Park College principal, we had an Aurora West principal, and we had an extended unpaid leave of an assistant principal at Chaparral. So those 4 vacancies created savings because we were not paying people to fulfill those positions. But in 2021, we had those people, new people in place, and so we fully fund them. So it looks as if you're looking at it, it may appear that there's an increase or a raise to certificated management salaries or classified management salaries, and that is not the case. Any such raises would be overtly and publicly approved at a board meeting. But yes, good point. So that would be a difference that you would note.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So not to put too fine a point on this, what you're talking about addresses this public comment that we had earlier today directly, right? Because the board has to approve any raises or stipends, and we did not approve any raises or stipends for administrators. And in fact, we had some of these vacancies that were fully funded that resulted in a cost savings to the district, but it was not reallocated to administrator salaries or stipends. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct. That's correct. Whenever you have a vacancy of a position in 1 year, at the end of the year, you're going, especially when you close the books, just like we did right now for 1920, you will realize savings because you had earlier budgeted that position for the full year. But if it's vacant for a month or 2 or 3, and in our case, we had several last year, in fact, 5, as I just mentioned, that is going to result in cost savings. And then you'll notice a difference the subsequent year, the following year, which is now what we're in now, because we're going to fully fund that position. But you're right. Yes, any increase to any salary, any payment of any employee is a line item, a separate line item that goes before the Board of Education. That's correct.
And so this public comment that asked to eliminate all supervisor administrative increases it's not a thing, right? There was no increase. There was no approval for increases in salaries or stipends.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Fully budgeting an entire year of those salaries that,
Yeah.
in comparison to the previous year, we did not realize.
Okay, so that answers the question from our public comments earlier. Thank you. Anyone else with any other comments or questions? And thank you very much for all your hard work, Pearl, and your team.
Yes.
And once again, I also appreciate you coming back. It's nice to see you again. I love your
Yeah.
class.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Pearl. I appreciate it too.
Okay, with that, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the unaudited actuals for 2019, 2020.
Second,
I'm sorry?
I second.
Okay. On the motion from Robert Perez, seconded by Ute Van Dam. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 26, this is about the GAN limit. The GAN limit report is done in accordance with Government Code Section 7906. Each school district shall report to the Superintendent of Public Instruction and to the Director of Finance, at least annually, its appropriation limit. Its appropriations subject to limitation, the amount of its state aid, apportionments, and subventions included within the proceeds of taxes of the school district, and amounts excluded from its appropriations limit at a time and in a manner prescribed by the Superintendent of Public Instruction and approved by the Director of Finance. It's recommended that the board adopt resolution number 2019-2020-04 GAN limit, declaring that the appropriations in the district's budget for the 2019, 2020, and 2020-2021 fiscal years do not exceed the limitations imposed by Proposition 4. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to adopt resolution 2019-2020-4.
I can second that.
On a motion from Jeff Donabedian, second by Ute Van Dam. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 27, Education Code Sections 17455 and authorize school district governing boards to lease real property after adopting a resolution of intent by a 2/3 vote, declaring the intention to lease the property, posting public notices during the required notice period, and accepting sealed written bids and oral bids at a subsequent public hearing in which the governing board may accept the highest qualifying bid. On August 11, 2020, the Board of Education of the Moorpark Unified School District adopted resolution number 2020-2021-2, resolution of intent to lease a portion of surplus warehouse property, Maureen Lane Warehouse, which declared the intent to lease surplus real property located at 5297 Maureen Lane, Moorpark, California, 93021. And provided that written bids would be opened and oral bids received at the board's September 15, 2020 meeting. After consultation with legal counsel and the district's real estate broker, the district has decided to move the bid opening to the board's October 13, 2020 meeting. This will allow the broker to continue to market the property, thereby maximizing the rental value and interest on the property. As such, written bids will be opened and oral bids received at the board's October 13th, 2020 meeting. This is an informational item only. No board action is required. And then district policies, item number 32. It's recommended that the board approve the following modification requests due to the unprecedented COVID-19 outbreak for board policy 6146.1, graduation requirements, community service learning hours. A, community service learning hours for the class of 2021 will be modified from 30 hours to 15. B, community service learning hours for class 2022, class of 2022 will be modified from 40 hours to 30 hours, and 40-hour requirement for community service learning hours will resume again with the class of 2023. Just as a side note, or on this, I think that a lot of seniors put this off to the last minute. We've got seniors that are going to be potentially, not able to have many volunteer opportunities. We've got a lot of the students volunteer for sports. They volunteer around the community, and a lot of that between social distancing and the closures of different facilities, we don't have these options. And with the potential for the last year to year and a half of the inability to do this, I think personally that changing from 30 to 15, the 15 hours at this point may even be too much for some. My son's an overachiever and got his done early, but I don't think that's the case in the rest of the community. So at the risk of having some students, have the inability to do this, I would recommend that we eliminate the service hours for the class of 2021 and leave the rest for leave B and C intact. So I'll make that motion. Does anybody else? Yes.
I agree. I agree exactly with what you're saying, and I definitely would second that motion.
Okay, I'd like to have some discussion on that. See
Okay.
if anybody has any, but thank you, Robert. You have the second. And then do we have any discussion on that and input? I'd like to get some.
I just want to clarify. So the district is recommending 15 hours, reduced to 15 hours, and you're recommending eliminating it altogether?
Yeah, for the class of 2021, that's this year's graduating class.
So they have 9 months to do 15 hours?
Yes, they, in theory, they do. It's just like, but I think that a lot of, I think there's a significantly reduced opportunity for these seniors to get that accomplished due to the COVID-19 outbreak. So that's, I think that eliminating the 15 hours is not unreasonable under these circumstances, but I'm open to feedback for sure.
So do you think, let's hope that we're going to go back to reality, but do you think there still is that possibility that they could get, if they have no hour, let's say they still need their if we approve this and there's still 15 hours they have to achieve that they have not done any in the last 3 years, do you think it's possible that they still can get this if we do not go back to reality?
I think it's possible. I think it's possible. I just they would have to be creative. They would have to because a lot of some of the community service hours that I've seen in the past have been volunteering at the different sporting events for the high school. And those are, at least up to this point, been shut down. And I think a lot of kids get their opportunities that way. And I think that, over the summer, people could get that, but I don't know if, I don't have this personal experience. My son volunteered for the Ventura County Agency on Aging, and he delivered food boxes to families that were shut in due to COVID. He had a car. He was able to drive to Ventura, to the city of Ventura by the courthouse, and a half hour each way, and deliver food to families in Moore Park who didn't have that opportunity. I just don't know. And that's certainly, seeking out, getting creative, and having the means to travel around Ventura County to get his hours in. I just don't know if this would put an undue burden on other students that may not have that flexibility or the ability to do that. And it just seems like in this time, again, this unprecedented time, that I don't see this as changing, it's not going to affect them academically or anything like that. And I think this is a nice idea to have, to require community service in order to, give back to the community and teach those, those lessons and maybe ingrain those type of, values in them. But I just don't know if this is the time that we need to enforce it. That's just
sorry. Dr. Hayes, what does Principal Pentis say about this? And is there ways for, let's say, the student that is not able to leave the house, or they're not able to, easily get in the car and go volunteer? Is there someone that that student can speak to for ways to look for these type of hours?
Yeah, well, yes, I think so. This came about because they always, Ms. Pentis and her counseling team do grad checks at the beginning of fall and notify students, who may be behind in units, or just they verify. And she just said they observed that there was an overwhelming amount of seniors this year who were more behind than usual. And I think there's no doubt that it's contributed to COVID, because usually summer is when a lot of students who are very, very busy, playing a sport, et cetera, that you don't get community service hours for that, or being in the band, or, so the busier, sometimes the more involved students have no other time to do it except for summers. And so the last 2 summers have not been available really for typical community service. We do, there's always resources for kids to go to for ideas of community service. That's available, and from the counselors, the Career Center. There's a plethora of opportunities usually, resources given to our students to help them, because, we want to give them and make it as easy as they can, and also allow for more challenging ones that, Mr. Sweet's son did. But I think she felt this year we needed to severely, reduce it, or significantly is a better word, reduce it, because her fear is that there's an overwhelming amount of seniors who will not meet for sure the 30, and she thought 15 was possibly doable. I think they would support, what Mr. Sweet is saying as well, for this year, waiving it, because the seniors have lost the last 2 summers. And that's when most students do their community service hours, not all, but most. But they did have their freshman and sophomore years. So, this is, you have some procrastinators, so they're in a difficult situation now. But, I think that Ms. Pentis and her team would be fine with 1 year of waiving it to less than 15, none up to 15, because she thought 15 was possibly something that would be doable. But I understand both, but I don't think she would have an opinion. I think just certainly alleviating the 30 hours, because I think 30 hours in line of what happens is definitely too much for our current seniors.
And I'm inclined to, take a step back and maybe talk about the 0 to 15, because I'm just remembering that we were just here dropping these, I think, at the end of last year, right? We had, so I think it's, as it is, the class of 2021 is going through enough, and they have enough stress that they're dealing with. And, they've already started to, like, they didn't expect their senior year to start this way. I mean, they had a little bit of hints, but I would recommend, and I know this would be going back, but I mean, if there's a way, either we come back in December and figure out where everybody is, or we waive it all together for them, because I can't see a lot of these students going out and having to add onto the sacrifices they're having to make right now, with just struggling to figure out, the new way of learning. And then in addition, having to finish their community hours. and find a way I do believe it's possible for like I can see, you know, certain kids doing it, but I can see a lot of other kids not having the freedom that, you know, like Raylene would have. So I mean, I would probably like go back on that, just understanding it and knowing that we were here at the end of the year. And I mean, I would say taking it out completely for class of 2021, or we go to the 15 hours and then we come back in December and figure out where everybody is and then talk about it again. But I can't see from now until the end of the year, the seniors, you know, picking up. There's not, I mean, you can't even do Halloween. How are you gonna be able to? I mean, there are ways, but you know, Halloween was canceled today. So if they can't, you know, volunteer at local charities, I think I mean, I agree with you, Nathan. I think there are ways, but for those the students that are they can't find the ways to do that, it's going to be difficult. So I mean, I would probably say either we scratch it for the class of 2021 or we come back in December.
I have two questions. Dr. Hayes, you said that the students lost the last 2 summers. Can you explain 2 summers? I know last summer, but the summer before, what was the obstacle there?
No, you're right. It was 1 summer. I think I meant 2 end of the year activities is what I meant. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. The end of the
Two
year,
summers in
the beginning.
COVID land.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh,
It's
well,
adding
Feels
up.
like 2 summers.
It feels like an eternity. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. You're right. They lost the end of the year activities. There's a lot of community service that does occur at the end of the year. And then there's also the summer. So I think I was looking at 2 time periods that are a little bit, you know, that are usually when they sort of dip in for that community service. You know, it is an important part of it's something that's a nice hallmark of our MHS, you know, graduation requirements. I think that we've always been very proud that our students have the community service requirement. But it's, you know, in this case, it's this was actually a request from the principal to reduce it. And then, you know, but again, reducing it to 15. But you're right, I did misspeak on that. It seems like 2 summers.
Seems longer than that. And then is this something that we have to decide today? Or if we do decide on 15 hours today, can we revisit it and decrease it or increase it if, you know, necessary?
I would not recommend increasing it. I think once you make a decision to decrease it, okay. But we could always come back and see where seniors are again in December to see if or to see where we are with COVID, to see if we're going to be reopening to a more traditional style of school at the beginning of 2021 and see about that. We certainly could. This is not necessarily, we don't have just to, you know, tonight to decide this.
And I agree with you, Dr. Hayes, that our community service hours that our seniors are committed to fulfill for graduation is really kind of one of the feathers in our caps that makes us different from other school districts, that we really have not only focus on academics and extracurricular, but also for serving others. So that's why I'm a little bit reluctant to completely eliminate it, at least at this point.
I certainly understand that, and I think it is a nice thing that we have in our district, or that we require. I just don't know if, you know, in this time when we've, at least up to now, decided that we were going to hold harmless our students during this time, that we could, you know, that we would hold this, that we could have someone not graduate potentially. It's a graduation requirement, is my understanding, that we could have somebody potentially not graduate under these circumstances with what's going on and the decreased opportunity to do it. And so that's why I think that I do understand, you know, the value in it. I just don't know if this is the time where we should, under these circumstances, if we should continue this or, you know, hold up this, you know, this.
I think you make a good point because there are probably some students out there that are stressing over this. That how am I going to get this done when there's no. I mean, really, is there? And this is why I asked Dr. Hayes. Like, let's say my daughter needed 15 hours. Could she go to the career center? Or could she go to her counselor? And would they find her help to get those 15 hours versus and then how's she going to get there, and then do we have to get permission for that? There's just there's a lot of I get worried about this because you mentioned usually this is done in the summer, and usually my kids would do it in the summer, but we lost this whole summer. So I mean, is there going to be a winter break where they can do this? Will they be able to do it on spring break? I see right now there's very little time for these seniors because they're just struggling with having to do distance learning, and then when they're not doing distance learning, they're making challenges to do their after school sports and events to cater to everybody's schedule, and then they're having to do all that homework and then reports and presentations. So I'm trying to find how, if there is students who still have at least 15 hours left, or if there's students still that have 30 hours, or I'm not 30, I'm sorry, but if they still have their 15 hours left, is it possible? Or are we just kind of, putting this out there for right now, and then we are going to come back and have to change this again?
I think community service right now is probably challenging for some kids who might not have transportation, or if they, if their families don't want them interacting with the community in some ways. But I know that our career center and counselors always maintain a list. It's just right now whether or not that list is applicable during this time period. What we could do, if this is what I could do for the next board meeting, which happens to be next week, I could have our the Moore Park High School do a quick survey and give a percentage of how many students have 15 hours, how many seniors currently have 15 hours, and then maybe the next some of the data points, what they have for hours, and we could determine how many students are we talking about, and then that might be more information, may make it easier to make a decision.
One last, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just add a couple of my thoughts. I think for Mr. Sweet and Mr. Perez, you guys have kids at the school district. So I definitely take what you guys are sharing with us in that perspective. What you're seeing, I'm sure parents have reached out to you about these issues. I do support the motion and the second that's on the floor to reduce the hours for 2021. And I look back late last year, we were asked to reduce the hours for last year's graduating class. We're being asked to reduce for this current year's graduating class. And, maybe we will, maybe we won't go back to full-time learning and the community opens up. But I think our kids, our teachers, our staff have been through enough. If this is just one little thing that we can give them this year to just take one thing that they don't have to stress about, I think it's a good move to take. And I personally think the sooner we do that, the better. I would hate to postpone this and have this come up at spring break or after spring break. And it's just going to cause, it seems like, more potential emotional harm to our students. And so I like I said, you guys have the high schoolers, and I get your perspectives. I also understand what Ms. Van Dam's talking about. This is a thing we like, but these are just some strange times. And if we can take that one headache or one stress away from the kids and the families, I'm all for it. So that's just my thoughts.
I think the main concern though is if these students can accomplish the 15 hours, if that is possible.
If there's opportunities available.
If there's opportunities available, because
I hear you.
There's not even chamber opportunities. There's not. I can't have anyone in the funeral home.
Snack bar.
You can't. Well, certain people, but you can't go to the seniors. You can't go to the. There are ways that that I know that I could craft to make it happen, but I'm just thinking in my head right now, just with my contacts, how I would be able to figure out 15 hours for for my daughter, if I don't even know what she has or what she doesn't have. But I'm just thinking of the group of people that are in this category. I do not think 1 week would hurt this. I'd rather have graduates know that we're thinking about them and they're not having to stress that, if there's no way they can accomplish the 15 hours, then fine. I think otherwise, if we do go forward with the first and second, if we can just bring this back in December, and see where our seniors are.
This will be kind of the last thing, which is in an effort to continue the philosophy that we're going to hold our students harmless, I think we should make this decision tonight. I don't think we need to burden our staff with getting back to us with more information, more studies. And, I would hate to see students that don't have these opportunities to have to struggle and get it or not get it and not graduate as a result of this during these times. With that, I think, unless there's any other discussion, the motion on the floor is to modify the graduation requirements to the zero out the community service hours for 2021 and reduce or modify the service hours for the class of 2022 from 40 to 30. And the community service hours will resume, the 40-hour community service hours will resume again with the class of 2023. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Date and time of the next regular meeting, the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Moore Park Unified School District will be held on Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020 at 5:30 in the District Office Boardroom, 5297 Maureen Lane, Moore Park, California. Please note that the meeting date and time are subject to change pending updates to the governor's executive orders to the Ventura County Public Health stay-at-home order. I'll motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
On a motion from Ute Van Dam, second by Jeff Donavedian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Adjournment time is 8:13. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Good night, Moore
Night.
Park.
Good night.